We're going to start today with one of my favorite sessions. And I'm going to give you a little background. I've known Andrew Wrobel for a little while. He was with a company called Rhine Associates when I first met him. They were the spectacular group that collected all the data around, chassis and drivetrains and lots of technical information about what was being planned to be being built, etc. And recently, last year, they were acquired by one of our sponsors, Escalent, which Escalent is a very comprehensive research and data company. And they're why I love them. I met them a decade ago, is because they actually focus on commercial. And not a lot of companies do that because it's been a very kind of opaque space from a data point. So today I have the pleasure of bringing Andrew into our intro, the future of commercial. Andrew is and I are going to have a lively discussion. He has a way of tracking and looking at things that is really helps start us off for the day. So Andrew is the director of commercial vehicle for Escalent.
Thanks, Kathryn. And as much as you enjoy having this session, I enjoy participating. So thanks for having me out this morning.
Great.
So today we're going to talk about the future of commercial. What does the industry look like from a powertrain standpoint? What does it look like from a vehicle availability standpoint? How does this all fit in? How do commercial vehicles fit into the future of the industry here? So looking at commercial vehicles, there's a lot of change that's happening right now, and it's not just from a OEM availability standpoint. We're seeing a lot of new entrant OEMs coming in across all vehicle classes, so not just focused in any specific space. It's everywhere, and all of these OEMs, the new OEMs, are focused on electric, or more specifically zero emission, especially as we get into the larger Class 8s. But the key here is that beyond just the new vehicles that are coming in, the new powertrains, whatever we know or have known about commercial vehicles is changing. It's not even about to change. We are going through a change right now, specifically to how vehicles are used, what's required of them, and what vehicle will do that job. Because especially moving into electrification and zero emission space, it's important to know that there's not just one vehicle that can support the needs of a fleet doing a job. What matters is that there is a vehicle that can support the needs of the fleet doing the job. Because when we look to electric, there's a lot of opportunities and there are a lot of challenges that come with those powertrains.
And Andrew, it's absolutely the most important thing about commercial is the use case.
Absolutely.
That's right. And so your point of there's got to be a solution at least for that particular vocational use case for it to even be considered.
Yeah, absolutely. And that plays right into here with growth. Like the key theme for today is growth. Growth in electric vehicles will be driven by both geography and by use case. Arguably, geography is kind of part of use case. But the idea behind that is just because it's a delivery vehicle doesn't mean that, and it's used to deliver product, that's a use case. The use case is going to be different if it's delivering products in Maine or Southern California, because you have weather to contend with, you have hills to contend with, you have all sorts of other opportunities that come with, are you doing a rural, a suburban, an urban delivery? All of these play into, can an electric vehicle or zero emission vehicle work for that use case? And will it be successful?
And even things around, I know you and I were at Delivery Con last week, and there was discussion around being able to access the curb. You were talking about delivery. There's so many elements to what can fit within an urban environment compared to, of course, rural use. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes in with how much are you cubing out or are you loading out? What is the cube out volume that you need to have available to you? Is it more important that you have cargo capacity, or is it more important that you can fit in any parking spot you find, whether it's a
Right.
parking spot for a bicycle or a parking spot for a semi truck?
And you're
Um,
talking about things like, capacity that affects not just, space and dimension and all of that, but it certainly affects zero emission, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, because batteries add weight. One of the big things that big drawbacks right now is that the cargo capacity from a weight standpoint is lowered with an electric vehicle, especially maintaining range. That's the other part, is it becomes a balancing act between what do you want, range, cargo capacity, or size. Um,
And then to add back in the geography, you were talking about, geography with regards to weather. And
yes,
so what happens when it gets really hot or really cold, right, Andrew?
yep, yep, because electric vehicles don't work as well in the cold as they do in the warm climates.
Yep.
Um,
So
but
this number is different than the last time we looked at it.
absolutely. I was just going to share that if you've been to the other presentations, you'll probably recognize this slide because it's the same exact slide, except we have a lower number now for zero emission expectations in 2030. Last quarter, we update our forecast on a quarterly basis, so 4 times a year. And our Q3 forecast that we updated, looking at from a bottom up approach, so looking at specific nameplate level opportunities, we reduced our outlook from 20% zero emission vehicles in class 2B through class 8 down to about 16%. And that's based on a number of things. And actually, we'll get into the number of things in a minute here, but there's a lot more challenges that are surfacing right now around electric vehicles. The Ford e-Transit is sitting on dealer lots. If you want an electric transit, you could likely get one wherever you are, because they have some available. This is starting to happen across all vehicles, even down into the light vehicle space, where we're reaching a point in time where the vehicles that are in the market are, they've found the use cases and the fleets and users and drivers and um, consumers who are willing to make the switch. And we're reaching a plateau where we've got to figure out what takes us to the next level, what takes us all the way up to some of the targets that are even being set by California.
So let me just restate that a different way. The use cases have been met with the current technology, and we need new technology to be able to expand the number of use cases that can be met.
Absolutely, absolutely, to encourage more people um, to transition into electric vehicles.
Right.
And one of the big things that we'll talk about in a few minutes here is trust. That plays a big role in this for fleets, is trust.
Right.
So sticking with the theme of growth, this is a slide that I usually include here. This just looks at the total volume growth that we're expecting for class 2B through class 8 in the zero emission space. And I've been looking at zero emission commercial vehicles specifically for 7 or 8 years now, before they even really existed in the market. And it was always assumed that because of total cost of ownership and because these vehicles are used for a business purpose, the business aspect would be the most important. And if it made sense for the business, we would see a hockey stick growth of volume. And while it may look like a hockey stick growth of volume in this space, this is zoomed in on that 16% in 2030 of commercial vehicles. So as we look at around somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million commercial vehicles, it's not anywhere near that hockey stick level of growth that has been
Always easier
expected.
to grow when you're teeny tiny.
Exactly,
Always easier to
exactly.
do a hockey stick when you're little.
Yes. But the important thing is that we expect growth here. It's just not monumental. It's not industry changing, and it's not going to a single solution for commercial vehicles. And that's another key point, is we're looking at many different options moving forward, not just zero emission vehicles, and there will be growth expected in those areas as well. So that's alternative fuels like biodiesel, renewable natural gas, even your traditional fuels, gasoline, diesel, hybrids will play a big role in that moving forward. But we do expect to see growth in all of those to where you won't be able to look at a chart and say, oh, diesel, right now you look at it and say diesel is number one and has been for decades on decades. Moving forward, it's going to be more spread out across all the different fuel types, depending specifically on use case. What is the vehicle being required to do, and what vehicle suits that need the best?
Right.
So when we look at adoption of zero emission vehicles, we take into account these six key parts, and these are really what build up that entire ecosystem of adoption, as we call it. These are the most important points, and all six of these points have to work together to advance that growth target. Otherwise, we see slow or even declining growth, as we may see at some point. It's not just that because there's regulations, we're going to see growth, or because there's vehicles available, we're going to see growth, or because fleets say they want things that will see growth. All of this has to work together to make it happen.
Certainly heard a lot about infrastructure being a barrier to growth, right? All of us.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things, if we go back to one of the early conversations that Kathryn and I had at one of these events, it was what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the vehicles or the infrastructure? Which one is going to be first? And at the time, this 6 events ago, 3 years ago, they have to grow together. And what we're seeing now is the vehicle side of things, the product is becoming more and more available. There's becoming more product that's out there, and the infrastructure is actually not changing much. It's still there, it's still becoming available, but that's one of the biggest barriers for fleets to electrify, because public infrastructure is great for private use, consumer-driven vehicles, retail-based vehicles, where you may be driving the kids to school or going grocery shopping, going to work, going to an event, going to visit family, whatever you're doing with the vehicle. If there's an issue with it or an issue with the charging or whatever, it's an inconvenience. But if you're delivering a product and you have a business to run and the business requires that vehicle to operate and that vehicle gets stuck at a charger, you're going to have a bigger issue than just an inconvenience. It's putting risk to the business, it's putting risk to profitability, and none of that is good for business.
It's just not acceptable.
Right. One of the metrics that I've seen is that Tesla chargers, when you plug in your Tesla vehicle to a supercharger, 99% of the time it works as designed, which is on par with a gas pump or a diesel pump, a fuel pump of some sort. You put the nozzle in the vehicle, you pull the trigger, and 5 minutes later, you're full 99% of the time. There may be 1% of the time where it doesn't function because of some issue, but 99% of the time, that's how it works. For most public charging on the EV side, it's between 65 and 70% of the time that you plug in and it works as desired. 30 to 35% of the time, it's not working. You come back to the vehicle and it has done nothing, which just doesn't work. It hurts the trust. I'll come back to that trust again a couple times today, but it hurts the trust that you have to have that it's going to work the way that you need it to, especially when you're trying to use it for a business purpose. And I know Kathryn said before, what's the share of the GDP that's driven by?
88% of our GDP depends on commercial vehicles of all different types. Yeah.
So specific to that, when you look at regulations, and we look to specifically California with the ACF and the ACT rule that are rolling out now, are they able to keep those regulations the direction that they're going if it puts risk to the GDP growth? If it puts risk to the greater economy, can they still maintain those zero emission vehicle targets? It's a question mark at this point, but there's more risk than there is opportunity, in our opinion, at least on that front.
Well, when we were talking about it last week, we kind of talked a little bit about some of the, I guess I'd call them kind of workarounds for specific situations meaning if you can't find something that meets your use case, if you can't find it, then you can go ahead, right? You can not have to worry about that.
Yeah, yeah. There's two big exceptions that as a fleet you can uh, leverage if need be. One of them is for use case. If there is no vehicle to meet your use case, you can get an exemption from the ACF rule, which is the one that launches next year and pushes towards 100% zero emission vehicle
Right.
new sales starting in 2036. The other one would be infrastructure. If,
Right.
as a fleet, you're trying to get private infrastructure, which to go back to the infrastructure side, that's what's going to drive zero emission growth for commercial vehicle purpose is private infrastructure, having a guarantee of where you'll be able to charge and being
Sure.
able to make sure that when you plug in, 99% of the time it works. You have more control over it that way. You're able to trust the chargers more than you would the public uh,
Yep.
availability.
Commerce will solve problems if you give them the time.
Yep, yep. So that kind of goes into the utility side of things too. The utilities have to be there to support infrastructure deployment. If, as a fleet, you need infrastructure at your location, you're likely going to have to run new electrical from the grid in order to support 4, 5, 10, 20 chargers, however many you need to run your fleet at some point. And part of the concern that we have is future proofing. And that goes into both
Right.
the infrastructure side, the OEM side, the supply chain side. These vehicles are changing very quickly. Gen 2 of the e-transit is around the corner. Gen 2 of most products is coming soon for electric vehicles. As these come out, how big is the change? How much does the
Right.
vehicle change from a use case standpoint? Does it make the old vehicles that are out there obsolete faster than ICE powered vehicles?
Right.
And on the infrastructure side, if you need more power, how long is it going to take to increase power if you need to install more chargers to support future zero emission vehicle adoption?
It's very interesting. In 2 weeks, I'm going to be at Fleet Forward, and one of the panels that we're doing there is a real look at the total cost of ownership. And what you're saying right now, Andrew, has a lot to bring into that, which it's not just, the typical stuff that you'd look at, but how fast is that vehicle becoming obsolete? Am I really even going to be able to use it? Or is it just going to be comparatively lower ROI? Right. So,
Right,
yeah,
right.
interesting.
Well, and moving into the fleet side of things,
I
um,
love this slide, by the way.
yeah, this is this is the pull in the circle of trust, right? This is what fleets need in order to adopt vehicles. It's not just is there a vehicle that meets the use case? Because if you're a delivery fleet or a refuse fleet and or a school bus fleet, and you know what your route is, you know the vehicle returns to base, you know that you can get a vehicle that has 150 miles of range, and you're driving 100 miles a day, everything should be great. But if you can't trust the vehicle, that's almost more important than making sure there's a vehicle that meets the use case. And this comes into, can you plug it in? How reliable is that plug-in going to be? What happens when it's plugged in? What happens if there's a surge? Where's the protection for all of that? But even on the vehicle side, the maintenance side of the question is a big factor. Um, Talking again last week at DeliveryCon, vehicles that are serviced on the ICE side, if they're serviced to the maintenance schedule compared to um, just whenever they need service, bringing them or something's wrong with them, bringing them in to have them serviced, is a significant decrease in unplanned breakdowns. Um,
A significant change in the whole infrastructure. The mechanics need to be trained differently. The
right.
how the need is smaller and, like you said, less stable. And so we need a whole new way of serving
Yep.
that new kind of approach to vehicle use.
Yeah. And the other big one too is tires. Right now, you bring your vehicle in for an oil change every 6 to 10,000 miles or so, and you can have the tires rotated at any point in time in there. But if you're not bringing the vehicle in as frequently, how often do you bring it in for tire rotations? And what is the impact of that to the total cost of ownership? Because total cost of ownership assumes that, hey, if you were bringing it in every 2 to 3 to 4, 6 months, however often you had to bring the vehicles in, and you could have your tires rotated at any point within that, and now you're not doing that, you are saving money by not having to bring your vehicle in for service. But if you have to replace tires faster,
Well, I
or you're
actually
not
understand
thinking
that
about
that
tires,
that tires have to be replaced faster anyway because of the weight and, because of the torque of
yep,
the electric vehicle, that there is being replaced as much as 50% faster? Is that what you've heard?
yeah, yep, yeah, definitely from what I've heard. However, I would lean more towards in the future torque management systems being set either by fleets or by OEMs to limit torque on start off or on takeoff, um, or load limited torque, depending, so that you don't get 100% of torque on start, which would help to
I
mitigate.
really enjoyed it the first time that I drove an electric vehicle, but I can understand why a business would not want to.
Believe me, faster is better, but
Right.
however, it has its
But
drawbacks too.
but what's really interesting about electric vehicles is really they're great big computers, right? So
Yep,
the kinds of information that we're going to be getting and the telematics of that vehicle and the connectivity of that vehicle should allow us to manage things better. But it's all change. It's all about it being different. And so trust, like you said, it's the key, you know.
yep,
Is this
yep,
going
and
to happen? Is it going to allow me to run my business?
yep, and will it allow me to run the business the way that I have run it, or what changes do I have to make in order to
Right,
accommodate operating a zero emission vehicle?
right, exactly.
So I know we already talked a little bit about the ACF rule, so I won't spend too much time on it. I just think it's important to note here that if you're in California and you're operating a fleet of 50 or more vehicles in California, even if you're not in California but your fleet operates in California, starting next year, you need to add electric vehicles to your fleet. 2024, and that seems daunting, right? But 2024, the requirement is one vehicle. You have to have at least one vehicle in your fleet, and it just means that it needs to be registered to your fleet. It does not mean that that vehicle actually has to do any business purpose or solve any business problems. It could just be this is the opportunity to try out a personal electric vehicle that just happens to be tied to your fleet.
Any kind of
Uh,
mileage requirement of driving it?
I don't believe so. From what I've heard is the directive is one vehicle
Registration. Okay.
registered to your fleet.
Okay.
By 2036, though, that's when they start based on fleet size, where any new vehicle purchases will need to be zero emission vehicles. This is very aggressive,
Yes.
especially based on our forecast, where we're showing total for um, the region, North America, we will be around 16%. Um, this indicates that most of those vehicles, if not all, will need to be in California and then some. Um, so not unheard of that California would roll back regulations. May or may not be the case here. We've already seen some governments like the UK has pushed back their 100% zero emission vehicle targets. So when we look further into use case, we look at fleet size. And 62% of fleets in North America or in the US have fleets of 5 vehicles or less. And these smaller fleets are going to struggle to add electrification beyond. So this is beyond the directive in California where it's 50 vehicles or less. When we go smaller in fleet size, there's a lot more risk involved, a lot more trust that has to be there in order to make the transition. On the other side, too, there's packaging constraints. When we start to talk about vehicle size and use case, these class 4, 5, 6 vehicles that are conventional truck, think like your F-350 chassis cab or your International CV, Silverado, Ram, those type of vehicles. Short wheelbase, you've got to find somewhere to fit the battery. And there's a lot of the high take rate of these vehicles there has to be a place to put the battery within these trucks. So there will need to be some solution that's found there. One of the short-term solutions that is launching now are LCF, low cab forward trucks. Mullen has their class 3 that's available today. Bollinger's launching theirs next year. In class 4, we've got Isuzu coming, Hino, a lot of these LCF that gives you a little bit more space behind the cab to package these batteries. So looking at the future of electrification, that's where it looks, especially if you read headlines. That's where everything is going. That's where all the investment is happening. That's where everything looks to be going. However, what we're seeing today is around 1% adoption, class 2B through class 8 of zero emission or electric vehicles. A lot of issues as to why, but we are seeing adoption, especially in the short term, being slow. And just conscious of time, I want to jump into the next few slides here, just because we'll get that gives a little bit more of understanding as to what's happening in each of these segments. So breaking it into class 2B and 3, class 4 and 5, and class 6 and 7, grouping these together, we can look at, and this is from Kathryn's data as well, the Work Truck Solutions Convoy data, which is super cool that we can leverage this to be able to get more insights into what's happening in the industry. From a vocational standpoint, the lightest classes and the heavier classes of medium duty are very, very weighted to specific vocations. Construction and trades for class 2B and 3, cargo and delivery for class 6 and 7, with class 4 and 5 being more spread out within the vocational standpoint there. Class 4 and 5 becomes very unique in that standpoint because they serve so many different use cases, so many different vocations within there. And looking a little bit deeper into class 2B and 3, what we're looking at is around 15% zero emission in 2030. This may seem low, especially because we've got 16% for the entire industry, and cargo van there has been a huge push. We've got Rivian, BrightDrop, Ford, all these players, Mercedes, the eSprinter, all of these major players with electric cargo vans, but cargo vans only make up about 30% of the market in class 2B and 3, with 65% of that segment being trucks. And these are your traditional trucks from Ford, GM, and Ram, where there's a lot of retail sales that are happening in there, and there is currently no electrification from the OEM available. There are refits or electric upfits that are available, but no OEM option on those trucks. We expect that to come 26, 27 timeframe alongside a hybrid to be able to meet 27 emissions. But we don't expect that to be the solution for light commercial vehicles. We expect to see a lot of hybrid activity for trucks moving forward. We do see a lot of electrification happening in the cargo van space. Around 40% of cargo vans are expected to be battery electric by 2030. And one of the big keys for the smaller classes is right-sizing vehicles, making sure you have the right vehicle. If you've traditionally used a class 2B and you need that cargo capacity, you need the range, you've got to balance the cargo capacity, the cube out versus load out, the reducing load versus increasing load, all of these business challenges against what powertrain solution works best. Not just, I have to go electric, I'm going to go electric. It's assessing from a business standpoint, which powertrain makes the most sense for the job that you're asking the vehicle to do. And beyond that, it's which vehicle makes the most sense. If you've used conventional trucks, could you switch to a low cab forward? If you've used a van, could you switch to a truck? All of these questions are issues that fleets are going to have to deal with if they're not already dealing with.
And it's not just the complication has expanded, right? And that there's more things. It's also that it's changing and evolving and iterating in real time.
Absolutely.
Right. So, yeah.
So from a body type standpoint, we see majority of this segment is service truck, service utility vans. And then from there, it gets a little bit spread out across all of the vocations. Important to note that these body types are specific to build to inventory and not build to spec or build to order vehicles. So there may be some other higher volumes for large fleet orders that go directly through OEMs or dealers.
Yeah,
However,
to put it in context, about 50% of inventory that's sold in the United States does go directly to large fleets. And you're right, there's very little good tracking around the actual body types yet. We'll get to that. But the small to medium businesses and the vocations, that's what we've been focusing on for this data.
absolutely. So moving into class 4 and 5, class 4 is a really unique class because about 50% of the volume in class 4 are cutaway vans. The other 50% being strip chassis and trucks with, I think it's 1,000 units of, 1,200 units of strip chassis in there.
And to be
So
clear, a cutaway van is just what it sounds like. It has the nose with the door to get into the front, and all the rest of it has been cut away. A strip chassis is even more empty, right?
absolutely. Strip chassis has a powertrain, a steering wheel, the pedals, and the chassis, and that's it. It
Right,
gets rebodied typically into a step van,
correct.
walk-in van. But even further on the cutaway vans, class 4 cutaway vans, there's two options today. There will be more electric options in the future, but today there is the E-Series, which is ancient, decades old, and the G-Van twins, or the Savannah Express from GM, that again has been around for decades. Those are the two major options in this space. Make up 30-ish thousand units for the
There are
uh,
a lot of contenders coming up in this space. I think more so than any of the other spaces, new OEMs. But again,
right.
we've had lively discussions, which we don't have time to do today, around what brand new products and new companies and how many of them will be successful and how many won't survive because of all of the changes that happen in the middle of the stream, right?
Yep. Yep. And we do see a little bit more opportunity in class 4 and 5, 17% of the segment to be electric or zero emission in 2030. And part of that is driven by incentive activity. So class 2B and 3 vehicles are currently only uh, eligible for the $7,500 tax credit. And moving into class 4, that jumps to up to $40,000.
Right.
Um, so there's a lot of opportunity, which means also, in our view, that there's opportunity for growth in total volume for class 4. Class 4 is by far the smallest segment out of any of the segments we're talking about today. There's opportunity for that to change, to see increases there in movement from class 3 into class 4.
Right.
On the body type side, there's a lot more, similar to how we saw on the vocation side. There's a lot more uh, equality between the body types within the segment. There's less of a single body type that leads the segment. Class 6 and 7, we see a big jump here in electrification or zero emission potential. A lot of that driven by school bus. School bus has the potential to grow. It's around 30-ish thousand units a year right now. It has the potential by 2030 to grow to around 40,000 units a year, with 45% of that being electric. This
School
will
bus
be
is a
pushed.
school bus is a good example here of school buses are sold differently, and so they're not reflected in the vocational mapping
Exactly.
that we're comparing to. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. But trust plays maybe a bigger role in school bus than it does in any other use case. Because if you have kids and your kid is on a school bus, you've got to trust that that bus is going to get them home or to school, one way or the other. So school bus fleets have a lot. They have a lot of trust, or need to have a lot of trust in these products actually working, and therefore there's a lot of risk that occurs there. If the vehicles don't work, these fleets may end up transitioning back to internal combustion engines or an ICE based product, whether it's hybrid or not.
Right.
So class 8, we've got tractors and trucks. Here's where we see more potential for fuel cell than anything else by 2030, than in any other class, I should say. We have fuel cell trucks that are available today, fuel cell trucks that are in fleets on the road today. But it's just a matter of infrastructure. How do we build out that infrastructure across the country? There's challenges that exist there. It's every year that goes on, we're still 5 years away. I think we've been 5 years away for 10 years now on having some sort of infrastructure in place. So will it come? We think so. We think it will happen. And once it does start to happen, it will kind of spread out like a spider web effect. It'll start in certain targeted areas like the ports, areas where they could focus on, hey, we have a big fleet that just operates in a specific area. Let's put in some infrastructure here. As more of these trucks end up on the road, the infrastructure is expected to grow along with them. Alongside that is hydrogen ICE or H2 ICE or hydrogen ICE or however you want to refer to it, but basically hydrogen as a fossil fuel. And this becomes a big opportunity for, I don't want to say saving the internal combustion engine, but retaining the key components of an internal combustion engine, the production in place of the supply chain, and being able to leverage that moving forward.
And the power to weight ratio.
Yep.
I think you've got a slide here that shows us what you're thinking there, right?
Yep, absolutely. So before we jump into that, the key here is that there is no one solution. There is no one size fits all. There is no one powertrain fits all. There is no one vehicle fits all. And there isn't even this is the vehicle we've used in the past, so this is the vehicle we use in the future. The landscape is going to change and it's going to be more diverse. Vehicle size, powertrain options, range, geography, use case, all of these words mean something to the industry and will determine how it plays out. But part of it is finding the good solutions or the solutions that will work. They have to be good and they have to be successful in order for them to work. And not all of the solutions will work for all of the use cases. It's figuring out which ones will and leveraging those across the use cases that will. So we see in our forecast, alternative fueling, CNG, hybrid propane or hydrogen and propane, growth in all of those. Propane is a little underrepresented here because currently the propane market is driven by refits, which we don't track in our data, but with Cummins fuel agnostic strategy, we're seeing all of these powertrains come in as factory available where they don't need to be refit in order for use. So we'll see hydrogen starting. We've got a little bit of hydrogen this year, but hydrogen ICE from Cummins really starts to take off in 2026. And we expect that to proliferate down into smaller weight classes from Class 8, where it will launch there.
To be really clear, what that means is you can have a diesel engine being fueled by hydrogen.
Yes.
And that's what makes it a good opportunity to transition because the manufacturer doesn't have to retool, redo, retrain, right? Resupplier, all of that has to happen. And so, and it does help with what we've identified here in this conversation, which is there are just things that an ICE vehicle can't do now. And there's a lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you mentioned hybrid too. And I think that hybrid is something that we're going to be hearing more about, right?
Yes. Yep. So moving into 2027 emissions, hybrids are one of the key powertrain strategies that will bring engines into compliance, either from a plug-in hybrid option or from a range extended EV. Being able to have a diesel or a gasoline engine that operates at steady state will control the emissions and keep those in compliance.
Well, I really appreciate your walking us through this as always, Andrew. It's great to be updated on all of this. And I'm looking forward to joining you with the rest of this agenda and also talking to you in the spring when we'll know a little more then, right?
Absolutely. Thanks, Kathryn.
Appreciate it.